Black Ops 2 came out in the year 2012. It's speculated on what kinds of technologies might be seen in the battlefields of the year 2025. Of course, the KSG is not standard issue, but other than that, this game flat out predicted in a prophetic way not just what technologies would be used in warfare, but what they would be called. It is so eerie and it's crazy that no one else is talking about it, so I am taking it upon myself to make a video about it. Today we're going to be talking about the weapon systems that Black Ops 2 flat out predicted. One of the most obvious and important ones is the hunter-killer drone. In-game, it is a small, portable, essentially airplane that you pull out of your backpack, you fold out the wings, and then you throw it in the air, and then it strikes its nearest target. This was honestly one of the funnest kill streaks in the game because not only was it really easy to get, but it was also just really fun to just run at somebody and then just throw it directly at them. Although the safest strategy was to throw it in the air. The most expensive and hardest to get kill streak in the game was a whole swarm of these things. Now, small, flying, man-portable explosives like this that are easy to use have been hypothesized for decades at this point, but it's only in the last few years, really kind of starting with Azerbaijan and Armenia, but really hitting an apex in Ukraine, that we are seeing these technologies mature, we are seeing people get very skilled with these, and we are seeing a lot of trucks, people, and even tanks being completely taken out by these systems. Since the war in Ukraine began, both sides of the conflict realized the utility of FPV and camera drones. Now, these technologies are not exactly new. They've been around for at least a decade, if not a little longer than that. And since they first came out, I think people realized the potential for these to be weaponized. But it is only again in the last few years that we are seeing these technologies mature into what they were kind of destined to be, which is cheap replacements for rocket launchers and Javelin missiles. For context, a Javelin missile costs anywhere between $80,000 to $100,000 per shot. A quadcopter, even a decent one, costs like $500, and the explosive you place on it to run into a tank can be had from anywhere from free till $20 if you want to make it yourself. On screen, there is a Ukrainian FPV drone with what looks like some kind of mortar or RPG round running into the back of a Russian tank. Now, it's been a while since I've been into armor, so I'm not aware of what kind of tank this is, but let's just say it's a T-72, one of the cheaper tanks Russia is fielding. A T-72 can be had for $1,200,000, and I can assure you, the drone that was used to take out this tank, there's no way it costs more than $1,000, but let's just say it did. If we do some basic math, you can figure out that for every $1,200 the Russians spent building that tank, the Ukrainians only spent $1 making the weapon system to take it out. If you go all over the internet and bring this simple economic fact up, people will rage, saying, no, tanks are still viable, blah, 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 just because of this, and that doesn't mean tanks are no longer useful. But let me put it like this. If I was in charge of a nation's defense budget and I was given $10 billion to spend to equip my nation with an Air Force, Navy, Army, and everything else that is entailed with that, you'd have a really hard time selling me on tanks when the enemy can spend $1,000, maybe even way less than that, just to take it out. The economics of it just don't make sense. These cheap, easy to use, man-portable flying explosives are going to completely change the way that guerrilla fighters fight, completely change the way tanks are designed. It's going to completely alter the defense spending of every relevant nation, as now they have to have an anti-drone budget. It just completely changes the way we have to think about defense. Now, if you're not convinced of this, let me lay out a potential terrorist scenario for you. Now, this is going to be really spicy, so just as a disclaimer, I am not telling you this scenario as something I want to happen or I am encouraging other people to do. It is simply to illustrate how easy it would be to carry out. This is to raise awareness. This is so that you can get involved and so that you can start figuring out how you're personally going to defend against this technology, and you can encourage those in power to start thinking about it as well. Let's say, for example, that there was a relatively famous rock star that was singing at an open-air venue, meaning there is no roof. And let's say there is someone who is just plain evil, just wants to kill the most famous person they can because they hate human life and they want to cause pain and suffering to as many people as possible. Well, unfortunately, there's a really cheap way to do it. He can order a drone off Amazon or even Alibaba for cheaper, make an explosive for, again, $20, and for under $1,000, could just park his car outside this venue and fly the drone in and kill this individual. And there is nothing anybody could have done to prevent this. That is really how easy it is. For under $1,000, this person would completely change the world overnight. They would change public perception of how these technologies are viewed. There would almost certainly be an executive order banning this technology until they figured out how to regulate it, and the list goes on and on and on. That is really how easy it is. It's way easier than you would ever think. Someone who is stabbing someone to death can be shot and put down. A mass shooter, same thing. If someone is being a menace and killing innocent people, at least we know how to handle that. You kill them. But if a drone comes from any one of the cardinal directions out of nowhere and blows someone up, and keep in mind, a lot of these drones have at least 7 or 8 miles in range, how on earth do you even begin to find the person who carried that out? And that person could do it again and again and again and again, and probably dozens of times without getting caught. Something else we see in Black Ops 2 is not just the innovation in cheap, affordable, disposable drones, but we also see what happens if a military power with a big budget also puts some money behind this technology. Sure, your average person could probably afford 1 or 2 of these disposable drones, but an organization with a defense budget in excess of $800 billion, they're willing to buy these by the millions, literally. What you are seeing on your screen now was the beginning of what the military now calls the replicator program. Essentially, the idea is just a large-scale version of what we were just talking about. You have cheap, lightweight drones that can be deployed maybe from an aircraft carrier or just kicked out the back of a plane, and you deploy them by the hundreds of thousands. And these drones then proceed to take out specific targets. Pretty simple, right? There is an element of this, though, that to me is absolutely terrifying, and I think to any sane person, they would feel the same way. Here is Defense Secretary Sabrina Singh explaining the replicator program.
From yesterday on the replicator drone program.
The replicator is basically a way to accelerate innovation by the warfighter by delivering low-cost autonomous systems at a scale of multiple thousands across warfighting domains, and that should be in a timeline between 18 to 24 months.
Now, I don't know if you caught that, but she said autonomous. You see, a Hellfire missile, in order to work, has to have someone holding a laser on the target. In order for a cruise missile to be launched and hit its target, someone has to input GPS coordinates and press launch. In order for someone to be shot by a gun, unless it's a SIG P320, someone has to pull the trigger. But what we are talking about here is leaving human beings out of the decision to kill somebody in a military capacity. Now, if you think it's crazy or impossible for human beings to be left out of the kill chain, I have bad news. It's already happening. Allow me to introduce you to Lavender. Lavender is an AI that was designed to help Israel more efficiently bomb targets. Using cell phone data, it keeps track of certain Hamas militants and fighters and where they are throughout the day. And then at night, it'll generate a list of places to drop bombs, and then the IDF proceeds to use its F-16 fleet to do so. According to the article from Plus 972, there is very little human oversight of this. Almost always, they'll just approve the targets at face value, doing no vetting to see if the AI somehow made a mistake or not. In fact, according to one of the Israeli officers that leaked this information, they reported that oftentimes they would just blow up a house with the militant's wife and children without the militant being inside. This is because the militant would leave his phone in the house before going off to fight, meaning Lavender would spit out coordinates for a home that was exclusively filled with women and children. And with the IDF doing no checking to see if the militant fighter was actually there, they would just drop the bomb on a building full of innocent people. This didn't just happen once, this has happened many times, and it continues to happen to this day. Black Ops 2 was completely right about the future of warfare. In the end, we will leave it up to machines. Machines that can be cheaply made. Machines that can be deployed by the tens of thousands. Machines governed not by human beings, but by robots, by algorithms. The same kind of technology used to recommend this YouTube video to you is being used by one of the world's most well-funded militaries to kill people right now. And I think that's the worst part of it. War is terrible enough. War is undignified enough and degenerative to the human being as it is. I think the last blow to any kind of dignity in warfare is taking human beings out of the decision-making process. Warfare is a human problem that should be solved by humans. The last thing I need is some generative AI that was developed by someone that doesn't have children to be in charge of who lives and who dies. Just as journalists and politicians use 1984 as an instruction manual instead of a warning, defense contractors and people that program generative AI have taken the Terminator movies, iRobot, Blade Runner, The Creator, and the list goes on. They have taken all of those examples of sci-fi, and instead of seeing them as a warning, they say, that looks great. I would love to participate in that. I would love to be the one that brings this force into the world. I think that's a great thing to do. I don't have children. I don't have any stake in what the world looks like in 100 years. So why not? Let's bring about the autonomous quadcopters. Let's give them facial recognition technology so I can tell it whoever I want to kill and it'll go do so. I think that's awesome. That will obviously not go wrong. There are no negative implications at all. It will not accidentally kill anybody, and it will make life better for everybody. After all, the safest world I can possibly imagine is the one where human beings have given up their weapons to robots. That's great. That's splendid. That's awesome. I am so glad the Defense Department is leading us in that direction, and I'm so glad Silicon Valley is helping them along at every possible step of the way. Again, people with no stake in the future for the human race, people with no kids, people with no culture or history or land that they care about, people whose only objective in life is money. That's great. I'm so glad that we are putting our lives into these people's hands, and guess what? We did not even get to vote on it. I'll end this video with a very simple request. If this vision of the future sounds dangerous, I would completely agree. The world is only going to get more dangerous from here on out with these technologies being out and affordable. I would ask that you learn how to use a gun, and maybe even get some gear to help you support that weapon. Now, I know, those LARPers are crazy. They should have joined the military if they wanted to dress up like they were in the army. Yeah, I've heard it all before, but let me ask you a question. In the year 2030, when crack addicts with quadcopters are the norm and not the anomaly, who do you think is going to be better off? The person who has spent the last decade learning how to fight, learning how to conceal themselves from these technologies, start getting read up on countermeasures for these things early on, etc., etc., etc. Or the person who just hears this information and just goes blissfully onward, continually consuming video games, continually masturbating and looking at porn, and not really trying to develop themselves and who they are, not trying to learn and grow and adapt to this ever-changing and terrifying world that we're living in. The person who will one day, on their stroll to the barcade, hear and then suddenly die. Who was better prepared? Thank you guys for watching. If you want to support the channel, please, for the love of heaven, check out my campsite link in the description below. It will be loaded with affiliate links and deals for specific types of equipment, and I would love for you to take advantage of that. It does help the channel just a little bit. You will also see a link to Civilian Expedition Outfitters, where I sell stickers of my own design using Canva. Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.